In this video, we will run our application and we will send HTTP delete with user ID and the JSON web token to see if we can delete user details. So I will run my application. Okay, so it's up and running. I'll bring up Postman. And as always, first I will need to log in into my application. So I'll bring up HTTP post request that sends login with the username and password. Let me send this request. HTTP status is OK. So I will need to copy the bearer authorization header. And I will paste it into our delete HTTP request. So to take it from the beginning, the HTTP method will need to be HTTP delete. And then the request URL is going to be your IP address or your domain name. In our case, it's localhost, and then port number on which your application is running, and then users, and then user ID, which we are going to copy yet as well. But first, we will need to provide authorization header, and we will use headers for that. Authorization, and paste the value of the JSON web token, bearer, space, and then JSON web token. We can also specify the accept header and tell our API that we want to accept application JSON back. Okay, and now we will update the user ID. So I'll go back to my login HTTP response, and then I will copy user ID from the user ID header and go back to my HTTP delete request and replace this user ID with the ID I have just received, like this. And now I can try sending this request and see if user was successfully deleted. Send this, and we get back a JSON response with operation result success and operation name delete. So this worked. Let's try sending HTTP request to get user details now. So that was HTTP delete. We will switch it to HTTP get. And the rest of the details will stay the same. Header will stay the same, accept will get the same. There is no body we're sending. All we need to do to get user details is provide the user ID in the URL path like we have now. So let's send this HTTP request. And we got back a 500 internal server error, which means that exception took place, but the exception message is custom. This is what we provided when we handle exceptions. So that exception was thrown when we were getting user details. Let's look at the get user details. Let's look how it works. Get user by ID. So if a user was not found, if entity is null, we will throw user not found exception with the message user ID. This is what happened. Let's throw our own user service exception with the record not found, like this. And that will be more descriptive. Or you could actually add another message that would include user ID in the exception message description. Let's hard code it for now. Let's do it this way. User with ID, and then we will add not found, like this. Let's try this again. Okay, my application is running. I will go back to my Postman and repeat this HTTP request to get user details. Send it, and we get back an exception message, user with ID not found. So which proves that the delete user details worked. Okay, we now have get user details, we now have update user details, and delete user details API calls working. And again, this is basic implementation. It's up to the needs of your application to improve it. What's important is that you know how to send HTTP request, how to accept this HTTP request in your REST controller, and how to communicate with the database to delete, update, or select, and then how to send back HTTP response in proper representation, JSON or XML. Now, what we don't have so far is get users, get list of users, get all users in our database, or get users by page. Let's say get first 25 records and then get next 25 records. So let's try working on that next.